Okay, so I'm gonna tell my college story, even though it's not a college story because I didn't go to college. Okay, so here's the thing. I always wanted to be an architect. So I was gonna pursue architecture, or I was going to. Well, no, there is no or. Ultimately, I wanted to pursue architecture and still, like, find a way to be an interior designer because I love interior design. I love both. I love being on the outside and on the inside because I feel like there are advantages to knowing the way in and the way out. So yes, except that when I was in high school, I totally wasn't thinking about college. And I think because of my GPA, which actually was a 3.7, I definitely could have had a higher GPA. It's just that I started to lose a lot of hope and I stopped showing up at some point. And I'm class of 2020, so the pandemic started to happen while we were in school, and I think just motivation started to disappear. And it wasn't that I don't have the work ethic, because a 4.0 I feel like was always in reach, and if I really applied myself I could. I think that I actually did better in school when I played a sport, because I think it provided some kind of like work-life balance, if you could have a work-life balance as a middle schooler or a high schooler. And just that when I got to high school, I didn't want to play the sport that I was playing anymore, and I felt like I didn't really have the encouragement that I feel like I needed from my parents or my surroundings to say, hey, like, you should really do this. And here's the thing: there have been so many like teachers throughout my high school career that really cheered me on and wanted me to do things. It's just different, I don't know them, so there's no emotional or like deeper connection other than the fact that I come to this building every day and I see you, and maybe you see what I do, maybe you are observing me and my grades and how my behavior and my mannerisms and my patterns. Still, that doesn't mean that you know me. And it's hard to like believe someone who is on the outside, someone who isn't really in your personal life. Hard to believe them when they say, hey, I really think you would be great at this. And I think really what I was just looking for was for my mother or someone like close to me to really sit down and be like, hey, I see your potential. Like, you should stop playing, and like actually do this. Because I was going to pursue lacrosse at some point, and then I think I was just afraid that maybe I would actually be good at it. And it was something that I had to do on my own. I think that independency came really, really early for me. And for a while, I denied it. The fact that I was kind of thinking on my own, living on my own, like totally having full control over the wheel of my life at a young age. And I just don't think that is necessarily natural. Except for me, it just came early, and I had to make a lot of mature, I feel like, adult decisions as a child, and I feel like it reflects on where I am now as a 22-year-old, trying to balance the art of becoming a woman, growing as a woman, and still experiencing this childlike kind of essence of my youth that kind of makes me, I don't want to say ignorant, more like naive a little bit. The naiveness that comes from just being young, and then the like super practical thinking that comes from being young and having to think like you're old and mature and like in your freaking, you know, in a different place in your life where you're more established, having to make those kind of decisions at a young age, it can do a lot of things to you and your perception of what is right and what is wrong. And I feel like that was something that people didn't really understand about me. So I think I hurt like a lot of teachers, I think, who supported me, and I just didn't listen to anything that they were saying because of my relationship with adults and my connection with adults. Any adults that were thinking for me, they weren't thinking with my best interests, and it ended up putting me in vulnerable situations that ultimately destroyed my innocence rather than protect it. So I just don't trust people who are mature adults and think that they can tell me what to do or how to live my life or what decisions to make. I end up rebelling because I found that I have to trust myself and my own thoughts and my own intuition. And the truth is, I feel like if I had went to college the way that my teacher wanted me to, specifically I had this teacher, I'm just gonna call her Miss D, I'm not gonna like say her whole name. And at some point I feel like me and Miss D were really close, although I felt like she wanted something for me that I didn't want for myself. And I think just in any relationship, whether that's just like family or that's romance or it's like coworker, you know, like it doesn't really matter. It just any relationship where someone wants something for you that you don't want for yourself, it can pretty much destroy that relationship and create problems that really don't have a solution or an explanation. Just simply you guys don't want the same thing for each other. And I feel like that's okay, because I think I ended up saving my own life. I really believe that if I went to college, I wouldn't have made it to graduation. I would have ended up like self-destructing for sure, because I'm just not made for institutionalized learning. Is that like a thing? I think I said that correctly. Yeah, I don't think I'm made to learn in a way that is systemic or systematic, simply because I'm not wired that way. My brain doesn't work that way. My brain will see all of the flaws in a system that is doing more to this humongous truck is backing up. There we go. A system that is trying to categorize you and more so place you in a specific space rather than give you the space to define who you are, I feel like. And there's so many people that are like, oh, I think you would have loved college, like the social part of it, you know. They try to sell me on the like social and the experience that comes from just college living, being a college student, and how many things that can expose you to. I just think that it wasn't for me, and I know that I disappointed a lot of people when I didn't go to college, and I know that a lot of people probably think whatever they think of me, because the truth is, like, at that time I thought I was like losing my mind because I went through this spiritual awakening. And the thing is, when you have a spiritual awakening, you are not in control. You are not in control, and nobody around you can really help you through it because they aren't you. And when you're that young, when you're 18 years old and you're kind of going through the death of an ego, I was literally told at that time that most people go through that when they're like in their 40s. So I'm a little bit early on it, and I feel like yeah, there's no way for me to control that. So it doesn't make sense for me to try to live life like I'm an 18-year-old if I'm going through 40-year-old life crisis. Like, what in the world? You know, it just didn't make sense. And I think that I feel like my the unconventional nature of my life path went over a lot of people's heads, and I think it turned me into someone who is misunderstood. And I really think it like gave me this kind of devil reputation, just because it seemed like I wasn't listening to anyone, and I just wanted to do whatever I wanted. And you know, I think it made it seem as though I thought that my way was the best way. It's just that that's not true, really. It was just that every way that was presented to me didn't make sense. It didn't work for me. Every way, every path that had already been paved would have led me to complete and total like delusion and isolation, because my personality is changing. You know, my like concept of reality is being completely dismantled by the revelations that I'm having, and this deep spiritual rebirth that I'm going through, where I'm learning about God in a way that I had never learned about God before. My consciousness is expanding, and now what I'm perceiving in the world that I'm navigating isn't even just my three-dimensional reality anymore. It's this entire like full, like I'm exploring the entire axis of the universe now within myself. And it's hard to explain that to people when they just see that you're an 18-year-old and you're not going to college. Oh my goodness, you're going to ruin your life. Oh my goodness, you're going to end up on the street somewhere doing drugs, like all of this. And then on top of that, people see a pretty face and they think that you're supposed to value it, that you're supposed to put it to use. And the thing is that a pretty face only means something to the person perceiving it, you know. And I think that going to college just wasn't healthy for me. And also my family life, my experience of family makes no sense. Our family dynamic is corrupt, and neither my mother or father was or is financially, I feel like, reliable or competent. So going to college actually didn't make any sense. And I felt ashamed. The way people made me feel was ashamed, because they assumed that I was just a rebel and I was just being a hard-headed like teenager, when in reality there was no evidence that could support college being a logical decision for me. Because I wasn't like, I mean, yes, I could apply for student loans, but why do that? Why put myself in all of this debt to go to a place that I don't even want to do? Like, why am I going to institutionalize myself before I even get to step foot in the world that exists beyond high school? You know, because we're institutionalized then. And yes, there are much more severe forms of being institutionalized. Still, I feel like it takes on many different forms, and I feel like one of those is the systematic way that our like youth is being educated. And I just felt like, why would I put myself back into the hole that I just dug my way out of for like the last 12 years of my life? 12 or more, actually, because We're talking about pre-K. Like I was admitted to a private Catholic school at 4 years old. And I've been in school since I was 4 years old. So why would I, like, what? It just didn't make sense for me to be eager to jump right back in. There was so much for me to explore within myself. And on top of that, the career that I thought I wanted began to become less and less and less appealing when looked at from a practical perspective, like going to school to pursue architecture rather than allowing for the universe to expose me to architecture in a way that I felt like preserved the love of it and the innocence of it and everything that makes me obsessed and passionate about it, rather than going to school and actually studying it and creating all of these limitations and rules and boundaries in my mind that I feel like would have come if I did go to school and learn the way that people wanted me to. And the truth is, I've been in college this entire time. It's just my college, my major is my spirituality, and I'm exploring like my physical reality. I'm exploring my three-dimensional world as though it were a college campus, and using the people and the objects and the places as my professor. Like I'm just learning and studying my world in that way. I feel like architecture makes the most sense because this world is definitely built, and in some way we are the builders of our own world. So I feel like mastering myself looked like being willing to find my career outside of the world where careers are typically found, which is in real life. I had to step outside of real life, what people consider to be real life for an 18-year-old, which is me going to college, getting drunk, finding friends, probably losing my virginity, doing all of that, even though a lot of people probably lost their virginity way before in high school. You see, I just wasn't living really the typical 18-year-old experience, and I'm not living the typical 22-year-old experience. I feel like, I have my moments, because I feel like my God values my youth, and so I still get those experiences that remind me, hey, you're still young, right? And then when those moments are over, it's back to me living according to my age in terms of my wisdom and my maturity. And I feel like where I'm placed in nature, the way that nature perceives me and my gifts and my talents and what it is that I already know, like the knowledge and the understandings that my soul came with. And I feel like that's also something that people just didn't really understand about me. I'm also very I wouldn't call myself shy. I just think I'm genuinely a loner at heart. So some people value socialization. I don't need it in order to thrive. That's my belief system. So I'm not going to feel like I'm missing out just because I don't have experiences that are involving bonding with other people and forming connections with strangers. That just isn't my thing. I feel like I could do and pursue a lot of things on my own, and whoever I meet along the way, we're just meant to be, that's destiny. I'm not gonna, consciously go pursue and put myself out there. That's just not what I do. And it's something that has evolved. My social skills, because clearly I have a whole podcast now, and inviting the world willingly into the depths of my psyche so that I can be analyzed and diagnosed and, all of that. And I could do it fearlessly because I've taken time. I've taken the time to get to know myself, and it started when I was 18 and I was old enough to say, you know what? No, I don't think I'm gonna do what you want me to. Though I do want to apologize to Miss D, though, if I did hurt her, because I felt like she wanted to help me. I just don't think I was helpable, and I didn't really want the help because I felt like people were going to, again, diagnose me. And they definitely did, from like personality crisis to bipolar to this to that, and people are saying all of these things about me. And maybe what they perceive is true to their reality. It's just not true to my reality. For me, reality has no boundaries. Like, how can a mind be diagnosed that is just simply figuring out what it is and how it can exist and why it's being experienced? And I felt like that's natural. I don't think you can diagnose that, and we try to so much, this like mental health thing. And I feel like if somebody isn't thinking in a practical manner, then they must have some kind of personality disorder or mental health or mental illness or something, when it's just like, no, we're like literally human beings experiencing a like cosmic otherworldly experience where our world isn't only tangible. Our world is also psychological and emotional and spiritual. And focusing only on the physical will do nothing but bring you misery. And I learned that. And then I started to explore the spiritual and the psychological and the emotional. And sometimes that can pull you away from reality and may not make sense to people. And so that's my college experience. I got into like mostly all of the colleges that I want, and I also didn't do any like architectural courses. Kind of like I took interior design my senior year. I think it was my senior year. Still, I feel like it wasn't enough to build a portfolio to practically go to college and then really get into a school of architecture. Which I feel like was intentional. I wouldn't go back and change anything. I don't regret anything, any of the decisions that I made, because I'm still alive. I feel like I'm still alive because of it. And when you are a black person, a brown skinned human being living in this world, there's so many things that are ready to wait for you to fail. And these systems are not created with the intention of you succeeding and thriving and really making it to the end. So, and I feel like just because we found a way to be accepted in these systems doesn't make it a system that's made for us. You know what I mean? Just because we figured out how to finagle it and finesse it and make it work doesn't make it the nature of reality. It just means we learn how to bend some of the rules and create spaces for ourselves that weren't there already. And I think for me, it's just the fact that the space wasn't there already. I don't need to be there. If you didn't intend for me to belong, why am I going to force myself to belong? That's something that I feel deeply passionate about. I can go and create my own space in my own world, you know what I mean? And belong in my own space, in my own world. And that's what I did. And ultimately, if I wasn't going to pursue college, I was going to pursue modeling. And that's what I told people. And modeling is just super not practical. And I feel like college also isn't practical. It's just that modeling was something that I had already had previous experience for. Like, I had experience being a model for years as a teenager. Do I think it was the best thing for me mentally in my maturity? Probably not, because it put me in situations where I am like super over sexualized, and I think it just did a lot to my perception of what is real. Still, it was something that I was willing to pursue as a career, because when people ask you like, okay, well, what are you going to do with your life, they make it seem like living is not enough. Like, just maybe I'll just live, maybe I'll just breathe, maybe I'll just like wake up and that's it. Like, that's just not a good enough answer for people. You have to have it all figured out, you have to have a plan. And I'm just like, why do we normalize being God? Why do we normalize being God? And you're asking me as an 18-year-old to figure out what it is that I'm gonna do for the next like 80 years of my life. What as if I had time to plan, as if I've had time to really think about the future. Like, I've been spending all of this time trying to survive high school, which is literally the only way to come on the other side to actually graduate is survival. You have to figure out how to survive, because it's a freaking like social warfare. Honestly. And it's not even really about the academics, unless you're somebody who lives in a household who, you know, is strict about that stuff. I didn't live in that household. I had good grades because I was strict on myself. There was nobody like, hey, you better do good on that test today, you better you better show up on time, yada yada yada. Like, there was no one there doing that for me. So I just think the fact that people were so upset when I wasn't willing to listen to them after a whole time of only encouraging myself and motivating myself, it just kind of felt like, okay, well, what about all of this time that I've literally like managed to survive and do pretty well, like well enough to get into every single college that I applied to. And I just felt like that was enough. That was evidence for me that I was competent, and that I felt like school had served its purpose. The fact that I could get into every single college that I applied to and still choose not to go to college at all, I felt like was empowering for me. It was the moment where I had to choose whether or not I'm going to make this my life or still choose to survive, you know, someone else's freaking reality show, game show titled Our Government Systems. Our Government Systems, the reality TV show, you know, like institutionalism. Like, no, I'm okay. And I honestly, now that I look back and I speak on it, I think that was my reward for graduating high school. It wasn't even really the diploma. Like, they had to freaking mail me my diploma. I didn't even get to walk across the stage. Like, you know what I mean? It was literally the pandemic. Schools were shut down, jobs were shut down, the world was shut down, everyone is quarantined, and it's just like, y'all expect me to be enthusiastic about pursuing college when everyone is pretty much like dying, if not literally, then spiritually, emotionally. Everyone around me, like, the world is not practicing institutionalism anymore. Now the world is practicing being inside the house. Like, we're all inside and we have to deal with ourselves and our emotions, and it's like, I'm not an online type of person. And I think it was just also the fact that I didn't get to wear my cap and gown and walk across the stage and do prom. Like, I didn't get to do any of that. And maybe if I had done all of that, I would have had a little bit more motivation to actually like take one of these colleges up on their offers. I didn't, you know. And I feel like I can acknowledge that as an accomplishment if nobody else is gonna be like, say like how kind of impressive that is. I feel like it just went over their head, and they were just like, well, if you're not gonna go, then you're pretty much useless, and bye, like I'm done with you. And that's kind of how I felt. And I feel like a lot of the adults around me have been that way, kind of like, okay, well, I'm gonna abandon you if you're not gonna listen to me. And I felt like that was the energy that I was given. And maybe I wasn't the easiest to get to. Still, I feel like that kind of protected me. I feel like it was providence. My hard head was providence for sure. I think it still is sometimes. It's just that I'm a little bit more mature now, so I know how to blend in differently. Also because I'm well into my spirituality and my religion now, so I've changed. I've graduated. In my own way, I've graduated spiritually. And I'm proud of myself for that. And I feel like there's nothing wrong with going to college, ultimately, if that's something that is truly your life path, right? Like, if it is genuinely the path that you are meant to pave for yourself, then I think college is phenomenal. And it has nothing to do with the systems or the institutionalism or whatever it is. That's just the experience for you. That just wasn't my experience, and I can't force myself to, pretend like things are when they aren't. So yeah, that's my college little like get to know me story time thing. Okay.